next 100 years, as Alexander done. So, hello everyone. Good evening, good morning, good night. It's absolutely unique world now. We can hear each other everywhere. And today it's one of our last summary webinar. And Alexander will share very squeezed, very helicopter view of all webinars, what we did. And I just want to remind us, we cover biggest topics as a population, urbanization, feeding the world, energy, climate change, the solution for climate change. So we discussed a lot about most important topics and most important part of our civilization and our climate and our earth. So today, Alexander, please share with us the summary of everything, because it's a kind of getting the MBA program, you know. I always share with you, it's like an MBA program to study in our course and listen your webinars, because you get all information what we know, like we all well-educated people and we know these basic things, but you're like a laser, you put it into the right things and put our attention and give some data what we miss, and you give a lights for our misconceptions and help us to build the right picture of the world based on data and based on just I can say simple logic, but I know how many years you spent to find this simple logic. And now you share with us this, and I really appreciate it. I want to tell you very big thank you from me and from all participants of the webinars. And please, you can start, and 100% in yours.
Thank you. I will try to open my presentation. Is it here right now? Yeah.
Yes.
Just a second. Yeah. I could talk on the topic of summary for many hours, because unfortunately it's very complicated and very hard to explain in a few words such a big picture, and very complicated to argue to people that the next several decades are so predictable and so clear, and we could change this path of the humanity in a very, very little like gradual, of very little direction. And people don't believe in this, and that is why I needed to create this 7-hour, or maybe it was 8-hour hours course of education, and mostly of sharing of understanding about the world. Because if we have the same understanding, we don't need to struggle and to argue. And anytime, if you are techno-optimistic and you will say, okay, the artificial meat will save the planet, or Tesla will save the planet. And I don't want to go to the very early stage of explanation that why artificial meat and why Tesla are not the solutions, and they are not save the world. So that's the problem. That is why I created this 8 hours course. And today I will try to summarize, and I will go quickly from the main topics, what I think needs to be in the focus of all like kind of decision makers, politicians, like top managers of big and small companies, and even students, because the students have to know about their future. And this course is explaining about the next 50 to 80 years distance. So that's about their life. And today I will focus on 5 main topics. First of all, I will describe briefly the achievements of 4Waves approach, how you could use it, and why it's important to look at the world through this 4Waves prism. I will give you the overview of the next 50 to 40 to 80 years of world development through the prism of 4Waves. And I will describe the main challenges we are facing on, and the new challenges what will develop for sure, and we know that they will happen in the next decades. I will tell you briefly, because I did 2 webinars about the climate. I will tell you briefly that why we can fix climate, like many people believe that we could fix, even if we think that we can fix it. And what does it mean? What means the climate catastrophe or any other catastrophe, what could happen in the 21st century? Then I will explain you what is the right main focus in the 21st century, and that's not the climate change. And at the end, I will share with you my to-do list. That's not the ready to implement the plan of a battle, and that is my next step. I am going to develop such a kind of a plan of a battle. I call it 100 plan of a transition, but not the great transition from agrarian to modern era, but the transition between catastrophe and prosperity mostly. So that's my agenda for today. And now I will remind you what I mean when I'm talking about 4Waves. I realized for these 10 years of research of the topic of global catastrophe and resource scarcity and climate and demographic boom and all these topics, what I've learned and studied, I realized that the interesting thing is that we're talking about demographic boom, we are talking about industrialization, we are talking about urbanization, we are talking about energy transition, but it looks like there are different types of activities that people from different countries are doing. So the China is doing the same, and Great Britain did it a little bit early. It looks like that the India is doing right now. And so it looks like it's independent events, independent activities, what all countries at Earth did. And when we're talking in 2020 year about the world, every time or very often we could hear that, okay, there is a huge inequality between, for example, Nigeria and the United States, or between Kenya and even China, or between European countries and the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, and the people mostly from the first wave countries. They're trying to help to underdeveloped or to less developed countries, because they feel guilty that they are so successful, so rich, they are so big, so high level of this pyramid of consumption, and these countries and people in these countries are so poor and so poor condition, and the living standards are so low that they need to be helped. And even the United Nations, the main focus of the United Nations now is on a third and a fourth wave countries, as I said, as they named these countries. And if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, 15 from 17 Sustainable Development Goals have a focus to help to the third and fourth wave countries to jump from the poverty and from this Malthusian trap, we could say. And when I look at all these activities, I found, and someday, that we are in a very huge transition, in a very huge long-term trend, and what we called the transition from agrarian era to post-agrarian. And there are many titles for this post-agrarian stage, like urban, industrial, highly energy consuming, and highly standard. And developed countries are here, and why they're here. And then I realized that we could divide all countries in the world into 4 waves based on one criteria: in what time and in which level, in which stage of this great transition they were in the history and they are now. From this point, the first wave countries started this great transition at the end of 18th century and did a great progress in the 19th century, and even in the 20th century, they did this huge development, and they built the modern societies. In the mid of 20th century, they mostly finished this great transition, but they were only 25, 26 countries who did it. And the rest, 150 or 200 countries, they were still in agrarian era. And then the second wave countries, including Mexico, Brazil, China, and many, many countries from Asia, they started the same transition. And a little bit later, and a little bit slower in this path, there were third wave countries. And one of the biggest countries is India. And the third wave countries' population now have around 2 billion people. And the fourth wave countries, still mainly in the agrarian era, the third wave country did a small step from the agrarian stage to the direction of the modern era. But sub-Saharan Africa countries, which I named like a 4 wave countries, they're still mainly in agrarian stage. So every time, so that through this prism, we could say that the world still is in a halfway of this mega transition. If we think that everything was done, especially when people are living in the first wave countries, they are living in London or New York or Tokyo or something like this, they feel that everything is good around. So they could not imagine. This is the cognitive trap. So this is a cognitive problem. We are thinking about the world from this environment where we are living. So we know that everybody have houses, furnaces, electricity, and it's so natural. And they have meat and they have dairy products, and it's natural, but not. Unfortunately, even now, the half of the population, around the half of the population in the world, is still living in agrarian era or in the level of agrarian societies. So for the next decades, for sure, we expect that countries from the third and fourth wave countries, and in the next several decades, these countries will represent 7 billion people from 11 billion, what we will expect to have by the end of this 21st century. But every time in the starting point, it happened in 18th century for the European countries and North America, and it happened in 1950, between 1950 and 1980 for the second wave countries, and it happened a little bit in the same period and a little bit later in 1990 for third wave countries, and now most countries in the 4 waves are at the same stage. At the beginning, at the starting stage, most countries have a GDP per capita around $1,000 per capita. It's a PPP currency, but then they go to 5,000 per capita, then they go to 10,000 per capita, and then they go to 20,000 per capita. It's done. 20,000 per capita means that this country is developed in the terms of World Bank or OECD or any other these big organizations. But in an early stage, and during this transition, the countries have an economic growth rate around 6 to 10% and sometimes 15%, despite the world have 2% for decades. And all the focus about the 21st century, again, based on the focus that the world economy will develop with the rate between 2.5% annually. But the countries on this transition stage, they have a pace in the first stage, I call it acceleration stage, they have a economic growth on a level of 10% a year or even faster. So in this starting point, countries have high birth and high death rates, so they don't have the population boom. But then the death rate goes down, they have demographic boom, then the birth rate goes down, and they reach the population peak. And many countries reach from the first wave many countries reached or will reach right now this peak, and they go down, they have a population decrease. And in the next couple decades, most countries from the second wave will reach the peak, and they will have the population decline. But the third and fourth wave countries will reach the peak in the 30, 50 years, and fourth wave countries will not reach the peak in this century, even in this century. Then if we go on if you look at the urbanization stage, at the beginning, most agrarian countries have the very low level of urbanization, between 5 to 10% maybe. And then they go to 75, even 90%, like most countries in the first wave, and even many countries in the second waves, they reach this stage, 75 or even 90%. And then the countries, when they start this great transition, they are doing urbanization. They need to build factories to produce steel, cement, gravel, and all these materials, because they need to build cities. They need to build the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure. And as I said in my first webinar, the main goal of this phase, of this stage of 400 years of a transition from agrarian era to post-agrarian, is building the earth, the technosphere. The humanity is building the technosphere, which give us the very high level of living standards and the huge power in terms of energy and work we could do. And without this technosphere, we are in agrarian era. So then we see that all countries is doing the energy transition. So they're going from the energy of muscles of animals and humans, which give us 2 gigajoules per capita, to the very diverse range of energy sources. But 80% of energy sources we have burning hydrocarbons. So we could say that we built the hydrocarbon civilization. And 80% of our energy we have from burning coal, oil products, and the natural gas. And so it gives us, in the first and the second wave countries, it gives about 150 gigajoules per capita. And the countries do the electrification, the country then, in the later stage, they do transportation, and they go from 0 passengers car to 500 passengers car per 1,000 of people in the countries. So, and if we look at the world in the 2020, we could see that the first wave countries, we could say that they finished this great transition, and now they will have the new future, and it will be my next topic, but not today. The second wave countries reached the level of maybe 60, 70, 80% of this great transition, but they need to finish a little bit in the next several decades in a different aspect. That is why we hear that China, for example, expect to increase for for another 1 terawatt of power plants based on renewable resources or natural gas or something like this, and China will reach in 2050 the installed capacity of electricity system in China of more than 3 terawatts. This is huge because 3 terawatts the whole world had 50 years ago, and now only China will have these 3 terawatts. And the third wave countries are still in the acceleration phase, and they are going to the deceleration phase. And for example, India passed its demographic boom and grow from 400 million people in 1960 to 1.4 billion, what they have now, but they will grow for another 300 million and reach their peak in 2070, for example. But Sub-Saharan Africa, most countries from Sub-Saharan Africa from 4 waves are in a starting point. So they have urbanization rate 5 to 10%. They have no energy. They have 20 times less of electricity than per capita than countries from the first wave. So this is the huge disparity. But that's not inequality. That's the different stages of mega transition in different countries. If you look through this prism, you will understand that you should not underestimate Sub-Saharan Africa countries or India or anybody else from the third or 4 waves. They will get everything in several decades from now, because we know for sure, especially from the second wave countries development, we know that for 40 years, especially for 60 years, the changes could be so dramatic that you will never recognize, for example, Kenya or Tanzania in 2070 or 2080. It will be totally different countries from now. And the important thing I explained during this course, that the main driver for the 21st century, the main driver for world demand, for food, for electricity, for installed capacities, for transportation, for cities, for steel, for cement, and so forth, will go from the third and fourth wave countries. And the main driver will be closing the gap between the first wave countries' consumption level and the third and fourth wave countries, not the population growth. And I said that all problems, what we have now with the 8 billion people, we need to find a solution right now, and the population growth will not add something dramatic to the situation what we have now. So we know that the difference between GDP per capita between first and wave and the fourth wave countries is 10 times. We know that the energy consumption per capita has a factor like from 5 for third wave countries to 30 for Sub-Saharan Africa. So we know that for sure Sub-Saharan Africa need to build 3 terawatts of installed capacity, or maybe 4 terawatts of installed capacity, if we agree that everybody, every human in the world has the equal right for energy, for food, for electricity, and so forth. So same with the urbanization pace. So the developed countries, as I said, and the first wave and second wave countries has a urbanization rate around 90% and 80%, 60%, but third and fourth wave country has about around 30%, 20%, 6%, and so different countries. And we know for sure that they will close this gap. And because they have a population boom, that means that they will be focused on economic growth like animals. So like it not like, but this energy for economic growth will be unstoppable. Because if the country jumped from 20 million people to 200 million people, you could not imagine sitting in a first wave countries cities, yeah, you could not imagine what is in the agenda in these countries. The only agenda they have, economic growth. They need build everything from scratch and reach these high parameters. And another important thing we need to remember, that traditionally the big organizations like OECD, World Bank, United Nations, they give us the list of 250 countries, or they give us the general, the one data for the world totally. So when we are reading that, okay, the food demand in the world will grow for 60% in 2050, we think, okay, 60% is it's big, but it's not as big as it could be. But if we go into the level of the third and fourth wave countries, we will see that the growth will be 10 times for vegetables, for example, 3 times or 5 times for meat, for dairy products, not for cereals, because cereals is a traditional agrarian diet for the humanity for many millennials. And when you listen to International Energy Agency, and you'll see, okay, by 2050, the energy demand in the world will grow up to 30%. And you see, okay, 30% is not too much. But if you go to Sub-Saharan Africa, as I said, the Sub-Saharan Africa has installed capacity of power plants, 50,000 megawatts. 50,000 megawatts is less than installed capacity in New York state. So they need to grow 20 times, at least 20 times from the level they have. And that means they will build not double the world installed capacity, but they will build the huge electricity sector. And nobody now are talking about this, because everybody are focusing on the climate change, on the renewable, and they operate. Okay, the African countries will build like 1,000 megawatt of wind or solar. 1,000, it's nothing. They need 4 terawatt. So it's 20 times more than you could imagine. So that is, and the world population by the end of this century will be, the structure of the world population will be very different. As you could see, the Asia and the Asia will pass the peak during the next several decades, but the Sub-Saharan Africa will grow from 1 billion, what they have now, to around 4 billion. So 80% of the world population will be from the second, third, and fourth wave countries by the end of this century. And of course, unfortunately, we could expect that this growth that we expect from the second and third and fourth wave countries in the next decades will give us a lot of negative side effects, of negative environmental effects, including greenhouse gases pollution. And this is a big discussion. Could we fix the climate? And as I tried to explain in my 2 webinars about the climate, we can't fix it. Now we have 2 scenarios. We have bad scenario and we have very bad scenario. And unfortunately, in this stage where we are now, we don't understand what the very bad scenario will look like. So we could try to imagine how bad the weather condition will be in the next century. If we have like +6 degrees Celsius, not +2 like we want to reach, or +10 degrees, but even focusing on one data like +2 or +4 is wrong, it's a myth. So now, even now, having only less than +1 degree global warming by Celsius, we have a lot of extremal weather catastrophes like fires, huge wildfires in Australia, in California, the the drought and the floods, and so and the ice melting and Greenland ice melting, and the problems with Arctic ice and snow, and the problem with methane emissions from tundra. And so a lot of information what we received, we have now from a little bit increasing in global temperature and average temperature. So we could not expect that if we have +3 or even +3.6, like we have now after the Paris Agreement meeting, yeah, we have now the target of a +3.6, and the scientists are trying to convince us that we need to get, if we have +2, it's okay. It's not okay. And we don't have +2, unfortunately. We have now +4. And as I tried to explain, we don't have right now the scalable and economically reasonable solutions for replacing the dirty and polluting technologies to the clean technologies. We don't have these scalable solutions for solar, wind, for hydrogen, and we are bombarded by optimists from electric vehicles field to artificial meat, as I said. But we need to understand the scale and the timing for this. So we broke the climate 100 years ago, and we continued accelerating emitted for these 100 years. And for the next several decades, the countries for the second, third, and fourth wave, they will start, or they will increase the emission, and not only from producing electricity and heat, like we know, this is the main source of emissions, global greenhouse gases. But as we know, 25% of emissions we have from agriculture, from food production. And we understand if we need to triple the dairy and meat production in these next decades, that means that we need to triple the number of heads, of cattle, and we have now like about 3 billion cattle, like cows, sheep, and other animals. But we will see this growth, and you could not replace cattle to electric cattle like we think. You believe that we could replace cars to electric cars. So, and of course, this is the long-term story, but shortly, we could not fix the climate. We're now struggling only for achieving the bad target and not to achieve the very bad target. But we don't know exactly how huge is the difference. And for me, the climate change is the catastrophic process we are living within already. It looks like the Roman Empire collapse. The Roman Empire collapse happened during 300 years. And you could imagine if we had the same climate catastrophe, and in 300 years, our grandkids could look back and they will see when this catastrophe started. But we could not say right now, is it a catastrophe already, or it's still, there is a chance to change, to improve the situation with climate a little bit. This is a pessimistic aspect of our situation. And of course, we see through the prism of climate change, we see the real conflict of civilizations between the first and even second wave countries right now and third and fourth wave countries, because we understand that if third and fourth wave countries will repeat same stages and will use same technologies and the same processes in agriculture, for example, like the first and second wave, it will bring us a lot of environmental issues, and it will pressure the biosphere significantly from now. but we could not judge them, and we could not ban or prevent them from using, for example, coal or natural gas power plants building, because they need energy right now. They are in a dietary transition right now. They are in urbanization transition right now. We don't have the hydrogen technologies, scalable technologies for steel production, for building the houses, for cement production, for everything. We are talking about this, but it will take decades to have these scalable, reliable, and cheap technologies, clean technologies. We could not do this. We could not develop these technologies, but we could not prevent third and fourth wave countries from their development, because what is the right approach, that the first wave countries should try very fast to zero their emissions, because they're responsible, what we know from the history, they're responsible for 60% of cumulative emissions, and they are started to emit burning coal first of all, and then all other hydrocarbons. So this is the big battle and big conflict between the first and third and fourth wave countries, which technologies and which processes they could develop and which could not. But the main issue, I'm sure the main discussion will be, could the first wave countries zero their emissions fast? I'm not sure, because what we know now, the United States didn't announce this goal, and we don't know, is it possible to do in 2040 or 2050? But that means that if they continue to emit by 2050 or 2060, they will add billions of tons to the atmosphere. I know that European countries are trying to go to the more green technologies, but first of all, most of these technologies are in energy sector, not in agriculture. And second, even in 2050, they will not zero their emissions. So that means that in the next decades, we will continue to emit billions of tons every year. And that's the main reality we need to accept. And we have to be ready that the catastrophic weather conditions will happen faster, more often. And from mass media, we will listen to this about this situation, worsening situation more often and more often, but that's our new reality. We are in a new territory. But if we, as I said in the webinar about climate, if the forests concept of the main roots of global warming, first of all, is right, we are very far from the solution right now, because mainstream is focusing only on catching and limiting and trying to cut the emission from different technologies. But we see that every year 25 billion trees right now are cutting, removing from the surface. So that means that we don't realize that any good forest initiative like deforestation with the goal of massive deforestation have to have at least two main goals. First, stop logging. Because if we don't stop logging, this is crazy to raise money, to raise donation, and to plant the trees, trying to create the reforestation movement, because in another place you will see 25 billion trees annually will be cut. So stop logging means that only planted trees could be logged, and we could use this wood and cellulose and something like this, but no other trees. And the second, we need to give the decades, the time for and the area at least plus 30% to the existing area. Now we have 40 million square kilometers, and we need to extend this forest area in five main forest regions, at least for 20 million square kilometers, better for 30 or 40. And this will be the very hard to implement because, for example, in Brazil, the main factor of deforestation now is cattle farming. The growth for meat dictate that the more and more farmers wants to make money, and GDP of Brazil is increasing from producing meat. And Indonesia, we have this palm plantation business because the Indonesia have a huge money from exporting palm oil. But palm plantations are not the same the tropical forest. So we have still this green land, but it's a totally different land than it was before when they were the wild forest. And the trees don't equal forests. And the forests are not the group of trees. Forests is the alive organism. This is a life system with its a genome, with this sequence of growing, with its bacteria, with everything. If forests are healthy, they will regulate the global, for example, water cycling in the earth. And if they regulate the temperature, the warming effect. But if they are not healthy, like right now, they are not healthy, of course. They couldn't work properly. So we need to restore their health. And as I said, I passed for these 10 years of my research, I passed through 3 stages of understanding what is the main focus. When I started in 2010, in the first maybe 1 or 2 years, I realized that the main focus should be on stopping demographic growth and demographic boom in like I say now, 3rd and 4th wave countries. So in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. But then I realized that there is a more important focus and more important threat for us because we already broken climate. And then I thought, for many years, I thought that the climate change and fixing the climate is the main focus. Before, I didn't realize that we couldn't fix it. That's first important issue I had. And the second, we still are in this great transition period. We still are in this great transition time. So half of the world population is still living in agrarian era. So they need to go to post-agrarian. And this is the main issue, because that means that we will double or triple or we'll see the factor 10 or factor 30 in the next decades for many aspects of building the modern society. So we will need to increase steel and cement production. We will increase the food production. We will increase the energy and so the demand for resources like coal, oil, or something new, but I don't believe in this. So, and all these questions, do we have enough resources? We will see resource depletion. We will see the deficit of critical resources. And now we hear that, yeah, we could have this deficit. For example, for raw earth materials, we could have it, or for phosphorus, we could have it, or for many others. And still all these questions are on the table. So my main focus today is on a different question. And the main question for the 21st century is, could we help to the 3rd and 4th wave countries to go through their great transition and to build the modern societies? So that means that by the end of this century, we will get 11 billion people living in the modern countries, in the modern cities, with a modern technosphere. But could we build this final stage? Could we reach this final stage and not to destroy everything, and not to be caged into the Malthusian trap or something like this? That is why I'm thinking that our main focus should be on these next 100 years, because I believe that in these 100 years, all countries could pass through this great transition and will build the modern countries, modern societies. But in this way, we could have a lot of troubles, a lot of problems. So we need to create the war room for monitoring, but first of all, we need to create the think tank. That is my goal, to create the think tank and to create the 100-year vision. It's not the detailed plan, but this is a vision. In this vision, we could understand how the first wave countries could go a little bit down. They will have economic degrowth. Maybe they will have a population degrowth like they have now. They will consume less energy. They will zero emissions, and so forth, so forth. And the second wave countries later a little bit, but they will do the same. And third wave countries, when they reach the peak, they will go down. So we could calculate it, maybe several scenarios, like Dennis Meadows and another great people did 50 years ago in MIT. So they did a lot. They calculated a lot of scenarios for the next 100 years of world development, and they predicted that, okay, in 100 years, if we don't change the trajectory, we will see the catastrophe. But that doesn't mean that people didn't hear them. The decision makers have heard them, but they could not change anything. Unfortunately, these great transition stages and activities are very prescribed. So you could not to use coal, because coal is the only energy source for many centuries. You could not use cars, because if you need dairy products and meat, you need to use cars, and so on, so on. So the people heard this prediction, but they didn't understand what could be done, how we could change the trajectory. And as we know now, we could not. Even for the next several decades, the trajectory will be the same. The great transition is very big, very large-scale process, and we could change very few things. And this think tank, what I'm thinking need to be created, will monitor the situation in the world and different regions and different waves, and publish this like open report about the world. And so it should be the place when people are working for the world, not for the country. And what I believe in, that in the 21st century, sooner or later, inevitably, we will need to create the authority, or I couldn't say that this is the world government, but we need to create this center of this decision making for the world, because if we don't do this, the situation during the next 100 years will be very dramatic. And here is my to-do list. And as I said, the first step I want to do, I want to create this think tank for working on this 100 years plan. And I hope that this plan could be something after the Sustainable Development Goal, because what is bad in Sustainable Development Goals, it's by 2030. No, we need to create this plan for 2130. We need to understand that for the next 100 years, we don't need to help to Africa to go from the poverty. we need to help to Africa to go from the poverty to the first level, second level, and the final level, $40,000 GDP per capita. That's the final stage for sub-Saharan Africa. Sooner or later, they will reach it. Or during this period, like many of my friends from the world of thinkers, of really nice people, they're thinking about the future and the world, but they're very pessimistic because they don't believe that the world will reach 11 billion of population. Why? Not because the demographic will, the population will go down naturally, no, but because something bad will happen. They don't believe that urbanization pace, what we predict now in the third and fourth wave countries, will happen because something bad will happen. And what we know that all our expectations on a green transition or something based on beliefs in a miracle. So we think that, okay, we could invent, distribute, scale, and implement very fast everything what we need to replace. So this belief is so naive that I understand that people need to believe in a good future, not in a bad future. But I think we need to have the rational understanding and rational expectations for these 100 years. And we need to understand that this is a battle, but this is a battle for survival and for prosperity. I believe in sustainable future, but in the next century, this century we understand now is the battle. The first focus, as I said, will be to help the third and fourth wave countries and their mega transition, and to help them and to help us not to destroy the Earth's biosphere, first of all, but again, not to get the critical deficit and some critical resources and so forth, so forth. The second focus should be on afforestation. As I said, this is one of the most important steps, and we could do it without, we believe in the afforestation, we don't believe, we believe the forest catching CO2 and it's not enough, or we think that the forests are the global warming regulating mechanism. We could extend the forest area for 30%, I'm sure, but it's not easy. Of course, we need to do everything what we could do in a climate fight, in a climate fight. So, but first of all, the first wave countries need to reduce their annual emission, and then the second wave could do it, and then we could reduce the global greenhouse gases emission in several decades from now, and then we could zero or almost zero greenhouse gases current emission. But after all these steps, I don't know, from 50 years from now, we need to absorb from the atmosphere these 2 trillion or maybe 3 trillion tons of greenhouse gases, anthropogenic gases, which increases concentration of CO2, methane, and F gases, and so on. So this is inevitable challenge for the humanity in this century. As I said, we need to create this world responsible authority, the war room, mostly, not the room for pleasure. And we need to create the new scientific discipline, because what was the problem with hydrocarbon burning, like coal burning and oil burning, that for 200 years, we didn't know the consequences of using hydrocarbons and burning hydrocarbons. We burned them for progress, because burning them, people had a lot of energy, and this energy helped them in urbanization, industrialization, creating the new food production chain, and so forth, so forth. Without hydrocarbons, we don't have the civilization like we have it right now. But after 200 years of burning, we realized that we destroy the global climatic machine of the Earth. So that's horrible discovery. And after that, we tried to find a way how to fix it fast. And then we realized we couldn't do it. Everything we could do fast leads to socioeconomic collapse and crisis. For example, if we close all the air companies, we will have millions of people jobless. Yeah, we will have economic collapse like we have now during the COVID pandemic. If we close all the coal-fired power plants, we will have inevitable horrible situation in many regions because people in these regions have electricity and heating for houses only from these coal-fired power plants. And so anytime what you think that we need to cut and to stop using this and these technologies, we have the catastrophe or the collapse or the economic crisis right now, today. That is why we try to postpone this problem into the future, because we believe that maybe we will find something good. But that is why I think it's important that we need to create the new multidiscipline or interdiscipline scientific discipline with the goal to understand better and better which mechanisms are crucial and which processes at Earth are crucial for sustaining these conditions which are good for living of mammalians. At least, of course, it's an ego. I'm the ego-driven human like most of you, but I love the humanity. I think that we are the top in this evolutionary pyramid, and I will be sad if we will disappear in this century. But I believe that we could create for thousands or maybe millions of years up front the science how we could help and how we could not destroy the critical elements of the Earth machine, which the Earth created the conditions which are good for us. But we know that several times in the Earth history, these conditions changed so dramatic that we could not survive. So we need to start to think like the big adult, not like a child and not like a teenager, because teenager is powerful enough to destroy everything, but we need to go to the next step. So that's my conclusion. And at the end, I could say that my best phrase for the goal of this course and for all of my activity I'm doing and I will do is to educate and enlighten and educated activism, because we have a lot of activists who are passionate of different kind of problems. And very often I could say that many of these activities are worthless or even are bad. So they could bring more problems than trying to fix something what is not, shouldn't be fixing, yeah? So enlightened and educated activism is really what we need in this world. And that's my final statement. Thank you.
Alexander, webinars, and every webinars is always something new. And not because you add some information, but because I interconnect them finally. And I was just like always surprised if I listen this few times and we discuss a lot, and it's take a lot of time and desire to understand, to build this picture, because this picture is not like in Disney movie or in the Avengers, you know, when everything is happening and they fight to our world and everybody is safe, plus minus.
Every tale has the usually the happy end.
Yes, this is a kind of law of Hollywood. And I just can I ask some few questions about the last ideas and some conclusions. When you mentioned about some new science of where we can interconnect all these topics into the one topic and systematically teach and share this, do you think it should start from adults, governments, entrepreneurs, corporates, or students, schools, or teachers? Where you think the most important to start with?
It could start from active scientists, first of all, and I know at least the few scientists in the world. Some of them are physicists, some of them
I
are
think you're very modest now.
some of them are environmentalists, and when they're talking about what they are working on, they're trying to widen a little bit their focus, or their what they have like in the title, or environmentalist. And they're trying to explain that I'm not an environmentalist. I'm trying to understand how environment works, how it's construct, what is important and what is not important, and how we could avoid the horrible mistakes in the future. So many of these people are right now working on this discipline, but I never heard, for example, when IPCC was created and the United Nations gave this financial support, and the idea was to create the new scientific discipline about the climate. But the climate is not the only main parameter which is crucial for our survival at Earth. So that means that we need to interconnect many other disciplines. And that is why, of course, if the United Nations or like the government in a leading country will announce that they support the idea and they support this new discipline creation, and they will distribute the money from the scientific academic budget to this direction, I'm sure it will accelerate this work, because scientists are happy to do the right work, but very often this grant system, what we have now, mislead them, because we have, I don't know, 90% of grants for climate change, for example, not for learning something, the alternative theories, the alternative concept, they're building the more wide discipline, the climate. So that's what could be done.
You know, in the startup area where I'm mostly from, we have a concept of timing, and sometimes people say half of the success of the startup is timing. And about the timing of fighting for the earth by using the more rational methods and more efficient methods, what you just shared with us, and the more right targets approach. Do you think now we are on the stage of the right timing of this fight to create the war room, new governments, or new United Nations who will protect Earth from the right perspective? Or do you still think it's we are in the early stage of this, let's say, industry, or I can say it's a niche, but let's say industry? What do you think about this?
I'm sure that the timing is good, and this is the right timing, time to start any initiative with a focus on these global issues and global transition. And the timing was good 50 years ago when, as I said, the limits to growth, this report to the Club of Rome happened. But the problem is then when people like a public, when they've heard such an ideas, they could not understand what's in the everyday life should be changed.
Mm.
So they don't understand how to implement these recommendations and how to do something good. But 50 years ago, it was the proposition of the authors of the Limits to Growth that in 50 years, the situation will be worse, not better. But now, because in this period, the second wave countries made this huge jump. And now we know this is the fact. For these 50 years, we continued to destroy biosphere. We continued to accelerate the 6 mass extinctions. We continued to accelerate emissions. The Kyoto Protocol was signed in 1997 with the only goal in 15 years or in 20 years from this time to cut the global emission in 5%. But as a result of this time, of this period, the global emission increased for 40%, especially, and the coal consumption doubled because of China growth. That's, I don't judge China. China could not to use coal, and they did the great revolution. I respect this very much, and I expect that India and the Sub-Saharan Africa will need to copy the Chinese path, because this is the most effective progress they did in 30 years, what the first wave countries did for 200 years. But the timing was good 50 years ago, and the timing is much more than good right now, because now we have much worse situation. We don't have enough lands for increasing for doubling or tripling the food production. We don't have enough atmosphere capacity for absorbing more and more pollution, what we did. So that's a problem. And I still believe that I didn't find any organization which has this specific focus to work on this 100-year vision plan, and to be focused on the world development, on the humanity, not in the countries. This is a problem. We need to go on the level above the national governments. And it's very hard because, of course, we trap to this geopolitical interests and national interests and so forth. But I believe like the Pope, like the Dalai Lama, like all other great people, they told us that we are in the same boat. You couldn't fix global problem in the territory of the United Nations, even if you clean up all these power plants, coal power plants, even if you transit from petroleum cars to electric vehicles. You are in trouble with all other people. So that's the main conclusion of the 20th century we have now.
You know, in startups, again, we have another topic is unfair advantages. Do you have unfair advantages when you're starting some product and launching some company? And from my perspective, what I learned from our webinars and preparation to our course, our unfair advantage is a 4Waves approach. Why? It's one of the unfair advantage, or let's say it's our technology, yeah, what we used in let's say in our company. It's because 4Waves approach where
you have a problem.
You find you are not miss main important things. You are highlight most important things because you use 4Waves approach. Because what I was surprised, I was so misled by, I can say, Bill Gates and Elon Musk, because these two heroes from my, let's say, early days of entrepreneurship, they was my heroes, and still in entrepreneur things. But they mislead me when they was so proactive and ecology, and they was like, we will try to solve it within next 10 years, or very optimistic. But I was like, how they can be on this positioning on this stage of understanding, when they have so a lot of resources, a lot of connection, they can just have a call to any president in the world. So I was like, wow. And then I realized we have the same access to the data, but this is just the filters. Do you have it or not? Do you have this approach or not? Because 4Waves approach give a power, give a huge leverage in any discussion. Just by using data and 4Waves approach, we can communicate with anybody in the world and explain by simple things, by simple storytelling, very basically difficult things. In the past, again, your example, yeah, when in Paris climate meeting, there was discussions, and India talk was like, why you don't give us this, why we should follow you. And basically the India, they follow first wave countries, especially because Al Gore and other guys, they heavily force them to cut down coal, using the coal and etc. And like I was, and another countries, they discussion was absolutely different. It's like they speaking about the like yellow and kilograms, you know, it's totally different words and totally different understanding. And again, 4Waves approach so simplify, at the same time help understand exactly what was happening. And again, why I'm highlight this part, because this is 4Waves approach is a real unfair advantage and real big leverage from my perspective. That's why I'm so excited to make this next steps, like a report, museum, community, invite more experts, and start to our global movement on this, because it's absolutely not make sense to make some global steps and start to attract more people if your fundamentals was not right. You will be just one of the 1 million activists what existed now, but they can't solve the biggest problem because they don't see the whole picture. So that's why I think 4Waves, it's a super big important approach.
Yeah, and I want to add that I said several times that many great and smart people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and many others, Ainar Lawrence, and they are, unfortunately, they are trying to convince us staying on cell size. So they are motivated by believing in something. Musk believes in Tesla, in electric vehicles future, and the transition is good, and gigafactories and so forth. So, but we are in a situation of the ideal storm right now. It is not in the future, it's right now. And the ideal storm, the problem with ideal storm is that you have the system problem. You have dozens of challenges and dozens of problems, and you could not solve them using like one silver bullet or something like the main lever. But that is why if you hear somebody who is staying in one niche, you could understand that this is not a solution. It shouldn't be a solution, because the solution for the ideal storm in the ideal storm situation should be systemic. It's a complicated. And that is why I believe that we need to create this think tank, because no specific industries, no investors, no neither top managers and presidents and so forth could not solve our situation, because the solution is the way. So we need to create the map and go into this map and to monitor how we are going into this map. And so this is the long-term project.
So another question, by the way, Praveen, you also, your microphone is already on. You can ask a few questions if you have it. Alexander, another question is about the, like, you know, small wins. And you mentioned that to make a report and share this report with the world. What do you think the main goal of this report? What the main insight should have from our course or this report? What is the main insight you expected to get in people's mind? One or two insights.
Yeah, as I said in my introduction, I had a unique experience of industry reform, electricity industry in Russia. So yes. I worked 6 years chief of the practical aspects of the reform, and what I've learned from this experience, that if you need to restructure something, you need to create the vision of the future, what you are going to reach. So you need to create the goal, to identify this goal. If you identify this goal, you could build the pathway how to reach it. And even in 10, in 20 years from now, if you have this goal, and this goal is 100 years from now, you could not to lose the goal. And the goal is the vision of the best, prosper, sustainable future, what could be built in 22nd century. And if we create this, so first of all, we need to create this vision, what future we like, what technological infrastructure at Earth we need to have, how we could produce enough food for 11 billion people. Maybe we need to rationing. Maybe we need to give people this like tickets for 20 kilograms of meat per year only, because we have too many people and we could not increase the meat production, for example, or dairy or vegetables or something like this. So maybe the future will be not the future of prosperity for all, but rationing for all. We will limit the air tourism, we will limit the car using and everything, because we are out of the Earth limits. So that's the problem. That is why the main goal of this report is to explain how good we are, how fast, how good in terms of according to the plan, to our vision, we are going forward. Where are our weaknesses? So which industries, which technologies needs support? And what is the main challenges for the third and fourth wave countries? And what achievements from the first wave, and could we spread these achievements very fast to the third and fourth? So this is like, as I said, the monitoring or war room on the world development during the next 100 years. So that's the main, from my point, that's the main goal of this organization.
Actually, this is Praveen. Thank you so much, yes, Alexander, for covering so many topics. I completely agree with the need for having a vision and having something that one can aspire to. Like I had mentioned a few weeks ago, that for me, in theory, it's great to say that we can all do something as a group, but in my humble opinion, it appears as though different groups have different ideas of what is the best course to follow. I mean, for for a different reason, for social, political, religious, whatever reasons, different groups have their own idea of what is good. And as we look at the past and try and plan for the future, I think a big part of any plans or any ideas presented would be to really give a lot more emphasis and importance to the psychological aspect of having people be ready to look at another kind of future and to even come together in agreement to work towards that future. We have a case in point of the United Nations, where no matter how good the intention of certain first wave countries may be, it's usually ripped down by a whole group of fourth, third, second wave countries, just because for whatever reasons. I mean, like instead of, without even needing to explain it, it's just ripped down.
Yeah.
So that the first world doesn't get a victory, even if it helps the second, third, fourth group. So that's such a big part of looking at any major solution. Yeah, that's just my opinion here. But I must say, I really have enjoyed this series of webinars, and I look forward to being a part of what you are working on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it was very well put together.
Great.
Alexander, so I just want to ask the last question, and I think we're ready to finish our webinar. The question is, imagine you have all kind of resources, connections, money, unfortunately not timing. none of us can give you time, but you have money, resources, connection, all most big connection, etc. What will be your first goal within next 2-3 years in this think tank or in this organization? What do you think it will be your first priority?
Two clear initiatives could be done easily, and I'm absolutely sure that they need to be done. The first, I will create such a think tank, and I will invite the first 2 PhD to this think tank, and then another couple PhD, because I believe that we need to create this institution, and we need to invite people who are ready to think about the world every day and to work in this project for the next 100 years. It doesn't matter, or by the end of their life. So the second thing is this global afforestation initiative, because I believe that Mother Nature is smarter than we are, and we don't understand, and we underestimate the role of the global forest for the health of the planet and for climate and so forth. And it costs a little money. It costs several $1 billion, maybe, not a trillions. And it's and we could very fast to create this analog of a Paris Agreement, but for afforestation, and we could close this plus 30% of areas in the territory of Amazon and North America, Congo, Indonesia, and Euro-Russia territory, and so it will be done. So we need to close this area from the human invasion for dozens of for decades from now, and in 50 years, I'm sure that will bring us a lot of positive effects. And I don't have the more detailed proposals, first of all, because like I'm not as smart as artificial intelligent intellect. Sorry. And that is why I believe that group of people who will be collected in this kind of think tank could create the excellent vision in detailed in different industries, in the countries, regions, and so forth. But it takes a lot of efforts.
Okay, so you very inspired me as a to be part of it because it's very practical goals for me.
So it's not easy because you see the world and our nature is a money and success driven. Unfortunately, I could say not driven by poison, because people don't believe that that's a good job for them to think about the humanity and the future. Because there's regularly, I listen from my colleagues or from the people who I talk to this, they're asking me, okay, but how you could monetize this? I said, I'm not about monetizing, I'm about the catastrophe. You don't hear me, you still believe that you could continue to find a way to make money and to make money, but we are in the ideal storm situation now. You don't need money anymore. So that's the main, that's the big, not the main, but the very big problem, that we need to invite the like so-called the serious people. But all the serious people we're thinking about, they are billionaires. No, not most of billionaires are serious people. They're serious in terms of money, but not in terms of thinking. That is why I respect Bill Gates so much, because he's one of the best from this army of billionaires. But of course, we need like many more than Bill Gates, and I believe that independent initiative for the several years from now is better than the formal something like United Nations, because independent initiative doesn't need to have a power to lead the world, but it has the power to explain, to share the vision, to share this global and complicated a little bit picture, to share the vision for the next 100 years and the final goal. And that's great, because what I believe in, that people, any of us, could create this vision and could spread it and could try to convince the other people to love this vision, to join to this initiative. And that is the easiest way of idea development.
You know, one of the, I think, biggest impact of the Silicon Valley, which is very well described by Paul Graham essay, one of his earliest essay about why Silicon Valley is so important, because they made a new structure of type of organizations, startups, which can change a lot some industries within just 5 to 7 years. And I want to say in my final words of this webinar, it's about the disruptors. Disruptors is a specific type of companies, startups who would totally change some industries in very short period of time. And if you forget about the venture and return of investment,
you have a problem
to get this, to achieve this. So disruptors is, as I mentioned, money for them just a few, but the main idea, they have a vision how to change some industry. Why this industry is is totally old and totally wrong, or missing something, miss some potential, and they can unlock potential of millions of people. So I think here a super big opportunity to build a very disruptive company. And again, from my perspective, venture capital, some government grants, or just donation from people, direct donation from like people. This is it's money is not the question here. It's just a vision, the strategy approach, and how you grow. You should hack the growth. So this is very inspiring for me as again as an entrepreneur, as you know me as an entrepreneur, my thinking. So that's why I highlighted, because I want to inspire all other people who watch this webinar after this record. It's usually 50 to 70 people watch the records of immediately after the record. So I just want to highlight this is a lot of opportunity for disruption, to building startups, because we don't have even we have 100-year plan. We should be active, very active from these days. It's not mean we have 100 year. We mean we should plan to 100 year, but we should active now. Yeah. So thank you, Alexander. Praveen, if you don't have question, we're done for today.
Ainar, may I add something, please?
Absolutely. Sure.
One of the things that comes to mind is when you talked about disruptors and money is not important. Actually, when you look at disruptors,
source of money here, source of money. Money is important. Okay. Source of money, yes.
Okay, even source of money. However we take it, let's just looking at money. Let's look at disruptors. When we look at, I mean, this is just a small example, okay? Yeah. When you look at a simple thing like a mouse that we use all the time, and now we don't even use it because it's by the finger.
Yes.
The mouse wasn't developed by Apple. It was developed by a think tank. The prototype of it was developed by a think tank.
Yes.
The whole idea of the interface between humans and machines was completely changed by Steve Jobs in the car. Steve Jobs, when he took it and put it on his Apple computer.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a previous technology that was reused and completely disrupted a growing industry. And so when we talk about disruption, I would like to add that right now the solutions to a healthy environment and a healthy lifestyle for a growing population, which is expected to be like $11 billion, that's 11 billion people at some point. The solutions as such, or the basis of the solution, are already here and available. They will not be coming from some other planet. What is really required is a new way of thinking. So not so much the creating new products as much as, hey, how can we do something in a different way that its impact is less? You know, we talk about the United States being a major energy consumer, but when you look at, and Alexander knows this, when you look at the energy usage in the United States over the last, 50 years, it's been decreasing with the rising population. Because, you know, we are using much more energy efficient.
20 years, not 50 years.
Yeah, we are using energy efficient technology.
Yeah. That
is what we have to focus on, you know, how we can use energy or any resource in the most efficient way. And the second part is a major part that comes to mind anytime we talk about anything to do with human beings on a global basis is the need for education. I mean, without that increasing people's awareness of their life and how the choices they make in their life affects everything around them, their society, which then affects the rest of the world. Anyways, that was my opinion right here. But Alexander, I did want to keep in touch with you and follow you and be a part of your next adventure.
Thank you very much, Praveen. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all, and see you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye.